Pretty woman, don't walk on by. Pretty woman, don't make me cry. Pretty woman, don't walk away. Hey, okay, if that's the way it must be, okay. I guess I'll go on home. It's late. It'll be tomorrow night. But wait, what do I see?
Welcome to Network with Pride, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Jenna Campolita, and I'm the External Relations Coordinator at Hofstra Center for Career Design and Development. That is our new name. So breaking news for everyone joining. We were the Career Center, and now we are changing over to the Center for Career Design and Development. This is a great program that we've partnered with the Graduate Business Career Relations in the Zarb School of Business. And it's a way for you to stay engaged and build connections. Even during this time of pause, when things might be a little uncertain, you still want to be working on your career development. And our Network with Pride program is a weekly program where we invite professionals to come and share a little bit about their career path, words of wisdom that they have for candidates, and how you might be able to focus on your job search now and build on your career. So even though the Hofstra campus is not fully open, we are open for business. So now in the summer is a perfect time for you to take a look at our many different programs that we're offering. You can see some of our upcoming Network with Pride. Next week we have Horizon Media, and that's going to be a very special program with the Director of Campus Recruiting and Inclusion and Diversity. So that is a hot topic right now to, how do you appropriately do your company research to find out what are the, inclusion policies, diversity policies at companies that might interest you. So next week at 12:15, I invite you to join us with Horizon Media. And then on July 8th, we have Chanel. We'll have National Australia Bank on July 15th and Fairway Consulting Group on July 22nd. If you need to schedule an appointment with a career advisor, you can do that through Connect. And Handshake has new jobs and internships every single day. So you want to be checking if there's any positions that you might want to apply to. In addition, follow us on social media. I have all the different handles for our Instagram, for Zarb Graduate Business Career Relations, their sites also, to take a look, and that way you don't miss out on a thing. So for today's program, I am so thrilled to partner with Matt from L'Oreal, and he's going to talk about his career path. And throughout any Network with Pride program, please feel free to utilize the chat feature should you have any questions for our speaker. And at the end of the program, we'll have time if you want to unmute yourself and ask questions and engage with the speaker. That's a wonderful way to voice your questions or any issues that you might have with your job search. But Matt is, someone who is, has experience being a New Yorker. He got his Bachelor of Arts from NYU, his MBA from Fordham. And right now, he is continuing his career at L'Oreal, but he's got a varied background in market research. At Time, he's worked at Condé Nast as a marketing manager. And, I always love hearing stories and career paths from candidates that were once an intern for the company. And it sounds like Matt will be able to share how he transitioned from being an MBA summer intern with L'Oreal and growing his career with L'Oreal. So Matt, I'm going to stop the share and welcome you to our program. Thank you so much for joining us. I thought it would be great if we kick things off by you sharing a little bit about your career path and how you got to your position today.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm always excited to participate in these types of panels and really be able to give my advice to anyone that's looking for it and by sharing my career path and what I've kind of gone through over the last, scary to say, almost 20 years of working professionally. I guess we'll step back to my NYU days. So when I was at NYU for my undergrad, you had mentioned, having internships, and I really think that internships are so valuable, and it's a really great way to to get started within a company. But, you know, when you think of when you're interviewing, you're looking for where you want to work, you know, the important thing is it's not always about you selling yourself to the company and trying to prove what you can offer or contribute, but it's also a way for the company to prove to you that, you know, this is a good fit culturally. And, you know, it's a way for you to explore and really see, you know, is this going to be the place that I want to work for, you know, in my professional career for a couple of years or an extended period of time, whatever it is. And so those internships really give you that taste of what you're gonna find on an everyday basis working for that company. So when I was at NYU, I actually had an internship at Time Inc. So that's kind of how I got introduced to that company. And many of you might not even know what Time Inc. is because it doesn't actually exist anymore. It's gotten acquired over the ages. But when I actually started working there, it was Time Warner, and during that period it then became AOL Time Warner, and then it broke up and just became Time Warner again, and eventually Time Inc. But I started actually in the accounting department for them, and I got, you know, a good exposure to what that company was about. And it was a magazine company. They had Time Magazine was the flagship, and then they had People Magazine, InStyle, Entertainment Weekly, lot of really big names. And so when I was graduating, I was able to, you know, I already have the relationships built with some of the people in the company, including human resources people, and they were able to really work with me to try to find a good fit for an entry-level position there. So I started as a sales and marketing research assistant on Parenting Magazine, which was interesting because, you know, at 21 years old, starting on parenting, and it's all about moms, you know, I didn't quite relate to the content, but it was a great experience to really understand, you know, the advertising field and media itself and communications. And at the time, Parenting was actually the most profitable magazine within Time Inc., more so than People Magazine. So we were winning a lot of awards. It was really a great place to work, and I was there at the height of that magazine itself. You know, I really wanted to explore more going into a marketing role while I was at Time Inc. And, you know, it just happened that my previous manager moved over to Condé Nast, and that's kind of how I was brought into Condé Nast. So again, you know, the important thing there is really building those relationships and starting to find, you know, as you make your way into these companies, finding who your mentors are going to be, because, you know, a lot of the times as you grow in your career, a lot of that's coming from these mentors and these relationships that you built. And as they're moving up in their careers, they're going to look back on you and say, you know what, I'm going to need you for this role as I move into my new role. Let me pull this person over. So Condé Nast, also a magazine publishing company. I worked on the home titles there. So House and Garden, which is unfortunately since folded, Architectural Digest, that's still around, Bon Appetit, that's still around, Gourmet magazine. I also worked on the bridal magazines for a little bit as well. And so that was a great way to really get to understand, you know, the luxury lifestyle, you know, category. And that was actually where I was introduced to L'Oreal, to be truthful, because even though everyone kind of knows L'Oreal, it's a big name, but the company itself, you know, I was working with them on different advertising projects because they were a big advertiser in a lot of our books. And that's how I got to really meet and understand the brand managers that were working on those brands there, to see, you know, what is their day-to-day. And that was where I started really gaining an interest in brand management. And brand management is a little different than marketing. You know, when you think of a brand manager, they're almost like a mini CEO of their brand, and they're kind of running their own little company. And, you know, you're thinking across functions within the organization. So it's not just, oh, I'm going to do a marketing campaign and I'm only solely focused on this, but, you know, you're really working with the sales, the finance, the creative teams to really build a whole strategy to grow that brand. And so I really liked that, you know, you were working with all these different areas. And when I looked, you know, at the time when I looked at what I was doing at Condé Nast, I liked it, I enjoyed it, but, you know, I was solely the numbers guy, the analytics guy. And, you know, there wasn't, in magazines, because it's a very traditional type of industry, you know, they weren't really on the forefront, which looking back now, you can kind of see what's happened with magazines, but they weren't on the forefront of really integrating and being functional or cross-promotional. So you really did work in silos. So, you know, if I looked at my career trajectory in magazine publishing, I probably would have only been in what I was doing, and I would just move up within that, maybe go to different titles. But I really wanted something where I could touch different cross functions. And that was something that was really embraced and encouraged by the organization. And that wasn't happening within magazine publishing. So I thought about what I was going to need to do to move into brand marketing. And when with the brand managers that I knew and I had relationships with, the one thing they all did have in common was they all had their MBA. So I decided I was going to leave magazine publishing and I was going to go back to school full time for my MBA, because I felt that was really the right next step to really break into into a brand management type of position or function. And so I did go to Fordham, and while I was at Fordham, the first thing you do, which is so crazy, but your graduate program is only 2 years. So right away, as soon as you start on day one, you're already thinking about your coming summer's internship, and you're really working towards networking and trying to figure out, what companies have programs, what's going to be the best fit for me, and where do I want to get that experience based on, what I'm getting my MBA in. And so I started reaching out to different companies and organizations, but one of my first ones was L'Oreal. And the reason why I was so attracted to L'Oreal, even in the beginning stages of getting my MBA, and knowing that would be a company that I would definitely want to work for afterwards, was because, one, they were a huge global organization. They have some of the best brands in beauty. And I just felt, from what I understood of the culture there, I could have a very successful and robust career within one organization. So I wouldn't have to feel like every couple of years I would have to leave that company to get a new experience. I could get all these different experiences under one umbrella of a company. So I started reaching out to my connections and trying to see, who they could put me in touch with to get to the right HR person who was hiring for this internship program. And it did work. And that was back in 2008. And, today there's so many different resources through social media where you could really see, like, who are my connections on LinkedIn and who do they know and who can they put me in touch with? I had to do it a little more grassroots, 10 plus years ago, but today you really have so much information at your fingertips where you could really utilize that. And especially in a time like right now where, everyone's at home, we're all really functioning digitally at this point. We had no other choice if we wanted to make these connections. It's even more so important that we have these types of resources to really understand what's out there and start building, start networking and building those, building that type of network for you to really take advantage of. So I was hired into the internship program. And it was the summer program, like I said, the internships are such a great way to really understand the culture of that company and make sure that it's going to be the right fit for you if you really want to pursue that. So I did love L'Oreal. I really like that, with the internship program there, it was hands-on from day one. I mean, you were really experiencing the day-to-day of a brand manager and what that looked like. And you were owning projects as an intern at the organization, which usually, you're kind of doing some administrative work and you're running out for coffee or whatever it looks like. But here they really wanted to test you and really challenge you and see, from a creative standpoint, how are you applying your ideas and what are you coming up with in terms of, being problem solving. So here's a legitimate, real concern or issue that's happening. How are you, even whether you have, in-depth experience or not, but just in terms of the way you think, how are you, approaching this problem? What's your solution to really understand, how to gain momentum on something? So it was great to have that type of experience. And, from there, what I loved about it was, they really are looking for people who are entrepreneurial and are going to apply those types of skill sets to anything. And, there was a sense of, as long as you're coming up with solutions, you can try it. If you fail, failing is fine because it's just a way that you learn. And you'll, through those failures, you learn and you just get stronger and better and you're able to really grow and move the business in the right direction. So I really love that mentality. And that's something that, whether you're in a smaller brand or you're on a Maybelline, it's something that is part of the culture of L'Oreal. It's actually a very French thing. And so it's inherent in what, values in people that we're looking for, of how they can come into the organization, really apply, out of the box thinking to really grow the business. So from the internship with L'Oreal, and it still kind of functions the same way today, is, you start with an internship, whether you're an undergrad or a graduate. And from there, you move into a management development program if you're hired on full time. So I was fortunate enough to be hired into the management development program. And the way they structure that program, which again is very similar today, is you do different rotations within different functions of the business. So I started in a sales rotation, actually, and I was hired into the professional products division. So there's 4 divisions of L'Oreal itself. There's a luxury division, which has Lancome, it has Kiehl's, it has all our fragrances, It Cosmetics, a couple other brands that you guys might know. And then there's the consumer products division, which has the L'Oreal Paris brand, Maybelline, Garnier, Essie. And then there's the what we call the active cosmetics brand, which is more skincare. So it's the Vichy, La Roche-Posay, CeraVe. And then there's a professional, which is the salon products division, basically. And so, you know, that's our channel of distribution is to salons. And we have hair care and hair color brands. So we have Redken, Kerastase, L'Oreal Professional, Matrix, Biolage, and many others. And so I was hired into professional, which I've actually stayed in professional my entire career within L'Oreal. And I'll talk about that a little later of why I stayed in this. But I really love the idea of you're doing these different cross-functional rotations. So I started in sales. I was able to really understand the dynamic of how we get our products to market, what that looks like through, you know, working with distributors or direct to certain customers. And then I moved into a global marketing position, which was also really interesting. And each of these rotations are only about 3 to 4 months each. And, you know, in global marketing, I really got to understand, okay, how does the idea of what a product is come to fruition and actually get produced? So, you know, how are we working with our global markets to understand what their needs are and how are we able to create products and you know, line extensions that make sense for, you know, specific markets and even globally, and how do we position that? So, and then of course, working with the labs and packaging. So it was really interesting to experience that even for a short period of time within the rotation. And then I moved into a commercial marketing, brand marketing position where, you know, I was on a US marketing team or brand team, and I was running a certain business. And after the program, you know, they move you into a manager position, a brand manager position, and you're assigned a brand. And like I said, you're kind of running that. Since then, I've had, you know, it was great to have those rotations in the beginning because I got to see what each area does and got a taste of that. So like I said, you know, the one thing I really love about L'Oreal is, you know, they really want you to reinvent yourself every couple of years and get those experience deeper dive on each of these different cross functions. So, you know, from graduating the management development program, I have had, you know, commercial marketing experiences on brands. I did go into global marketing. I worked on Biolage, developing a couple different lines for a couple of years. I did have more sales, you know, experiences and rotations. And, you know, I feel like everything kind of has come to fruition when I actually was sent down to Mexico to do an international assignment where I was sent down there to launch the Matrix and Biolage brand. And, you know, doing that, I was put into that position because I had all these different experiences in the past, and I had those relationships internally built where, you know, if we're going to go and we're going to put a brand in an international market, we're going to have to rely on the global marketing team to be able to understand what products we're going to, you know, import and bring in there. I need to understand the commercial marketing aspect to be able to launch an entire brand in a market. And I need to understand distribution and sales. So having had those experiences, it was, you know, I was the right fit for that brand to go down there and to be able to launch an entire brand in a new market. And it's actually has been one of our most successful launches in Latin America in the history of L'Oreal as we're putting brands down there. And, you know, it just made sense at the price point for what we were trying to achieve with those, you know, with that level stylist and salon owner. I then, you know, after my Mexico experience, because that was about 5 years ago at this point, I then wanted to come back to the United States. I felt like, okay, this is my time to return. But I really thought about, you know, where do I want to go? I've had all these different experiences, and the company is very open to me, you know, navigating my own career and being able to make those decisions. And, you know, one area that I felt like I wanted to go deeper on was sales and distribution. So I moved into managing the New England sales team. So I actually moved from New York to Mexico, and then Mexico now to Boston, which I'm still up in the Boston area. And I was managing our New England sales team for a couple of years. And then since then I moved into other business development type of roles, which I'm in now, where, you know, I'm leading the different sales teams on a national basis, but it's more from where we're going after new partnerships and really driving the business into the future. So that's kind of my story.
I'm so thrilled, you know, because there's so many points that you touched upon that I want to take a minute to unpack a little bit. And obviously the value of internships, we all are aware of how essential it is to gain that direct experience in order to test out specific career paths. And, you know, we love those rotational programs where you get a little sense of different areas within the company to find the right fit. But there are two things you touched upon that I do want to take a moment. And if anyone has questions, they can use the chat. But you had mentioned, you know, the kind of the idea of pursuing a graduate degree once you knew that's what you needed in order to progress. And I wanted to talk a little bit about it because you and I chatted briefly about finding a job in a difficult climate. We talked about, you know, post 9/11, post 2008, how, you know, we've had our own struggles. We've seen friends, you know, maybe have struggles. And, you know, sometimes graduate school seems like a good option, but I often find if the candidate doesn't have intention or understand how the graduate degree may assist with their career progression, it can be a kind of a disconnect. So if you could talk a little bit more about, you mentioned doing informational interviews and knowing that's what you needed for the next step in your career. So if you could speak a little bit to that.
That's a great point, and I'm glad you brought that up because there's a couple of things on that. So, you know, at the time when I decided I was going to pursue my MBA, you know, that was 12 plus years ago. So much has changed in that time, and you know, I'm isolating that time and saying, okay, well, things were still functioning very traditional. We've gone through so many changes, and you know, over the last years, especially as we've become more digital, you know, in our nature and what those businesses look like. You know, I wouldn't say now today that it's essential now to have the MBA going into brand marketing positions. I think, you know, to your point, it's, you know, what's the intention behind it? And, you know, you really have to isolate the MBA. Where is that going to get me in the long run? And I don't know if you always need to really grow your career in long run. And just, you know, as I'm watching, you know, how we're hiring over the last couple of years, we've had major shifts in, you know, do we go on to campuses for you know, graduate business schools? Does it make sense? You know, we still have MBA internship programs and stuff like that, but we might not be as aggressive as we were with hiring specific MBAs because we're seeing the pool of what people are able to do on their own and learn, that you don't necessarily need the MBA anymore. I think if it's something that you want to pursue and you see the long-term benefit of it, it's something that you should definitely do. I definitely see the benefit of why I got my MBA and how it's helped me in my career. You know, some of it is just to open doors, but some of it is actually I apply some of the learnings I had and you know, into my everyday. But it's not to say you can't do it on your own either, you know, without. Then yeah, I mean, it is interesting. You know, we're in a very obviously unique time right now with COVID and the shutdown, and you know, we're most likely in a recession. We'll know that, you know, moving into Q3 because you need 2 quarters of decline to say you're in a recession. But every time I was going out looking for a job, you know, after college, you know, it was post 9/11. We were in a recession in 2002 as I was trying to interview and find a job. You know, as I was pursuing my internship with L'Oreal and you know, in 2008, we had just hit a recession. So you have to, you know, the jobs aren't as available as they normally would be. And you really have to make yourself stand out. And, you know, the one thing I say is no matter what job you're in, you're always in sales basically, because no matter what you do, you're always selling something. If you're in marketing, you're trying to sell your concepts and your products and ideas to your salespeople for them to be able to sell it to their customers. If you're in finance, you're in sales as well. You know, you're always selling something. So, you know, you almost have to think about as you're going about, you know, pursuing, you know, a job, you know, and your interviews, it's really being a salesperson. And, you know, you want to make sure that you're understanding what they're looking for and how you can speak to that with what you can contribute based on that, where your experiences line up to what they're looking for. And, you know, as you're, you know, there's so many different stages of selling, but, you know, as you're looking for, you know, in terms of prospecting, you know, you want to make sure you're building your network. You're looking and reaching out to people who you think might be able to help you get to the right person to understand, you know, to get into a company. And it really is all about selling and building those relationships. And, you know, once you decide to accept a job, it's really a partnership, because you want to make sure that, they're hiring you because they see a value in you, but you're accepting that job and wanting to work there because you see, a benefit that you're getting from them as well. It needs to be a partnership.
That's such helpful information. And I'm looking at the time, and I just want to make sure if anyone tuning in has questions, you can either ask yourself, if you want to make your camera displayed, and you want to use the chat. But if anyone has questions for Matt while we're all together in the Zoom, this would be a great time for it.
Even if it's questions on the company, if anyone's interested in understanding a little bit more, I'm happy to answer anything you guys are thinking about.
Sure. Andrew, do you have a question?
Yeah. Hi, Matt. My name is Andrew Marshall. I'm an incoming freshman at Hofstra. I'm in the Lawrence Herbert School of Communications. And as a marketing professional, you talk about sort of like seeing your potential growth within a company. I was just curious if you have any advice to people like me who are just sort of entering this new phase of our life. How can I sort of identify when I'm looking at different organizations, like how to plan ahead in that regard, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and I kind of mentioned this before, is we're at a fortunate point in the sense that there's so much information available through social media and different apps. So, one thing is you're trying to explore and try to figure out what a company is about, what their culture is about. Like a Glassdoor, for example, is a perfect way to understand and really read the comments. And you'll have positive and negative in there, but from current and past employees of what they say about that organization. As you're exploring LinkedIn and you're seeing, who works here, what's their background, you can start getting a sense of, especially people that have been at a company for a long time. Like if you went to my LinkedIn, you would see all the different positions that I've had within L'Oreal. And to me, that's telling about, how that company functions and where they're trying to grow their employees and what experiences are looking for those employees to have to continue to make sure that they're moving up into, whatever position or how they're growing that person to benefit the business. And, it's funny because, 30 plus years ago, your career trajectory would be, climbing the ladder. You just continue to go up and up and up. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think, it's really, up and down and up and down and across and all over the place. And you kind of create your own path. And, sometimes you might take a position within a company, you might start at one position in a company, then, based on whatever the needs are, especially since we're in an environment where we're constantly changing, even for me thinking about what my next step is, after with everything that's happened with COVID, I look at my resume and I say, what, I still haven't gotten real true digital experience. I might not pursue a digital role within L'Oreal that's going to be a step above, the position I'm in. I might do a lateral move, and that's completely okay because that's going to get me the experience to then be able to get that next move up the ladder. But I think as you're looking at people on social media and you're really doing that research, you're going to get a really good instinct of, what that company is about and what they're trying to do and how they're trying to grow their employees to make them better. Does that answer it?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Perfect. I checked out your LinkedIn too. It's very impressive.
Okay. Thanks, Andrew.
And I think, Matt, you did a wonderful job. We always talk about telling our story, talking about your career path and the narrative that you shared today. I think what struck me the most is when you were talking about things that you loved, and that really shines through. And I think it's essential for, sometimes candidates are thinking of what will look good on my resume rather than what I'm really interested in doing and what will feel good, what motivates me. And, hearing your story, it's clear that motivation was there. And, it's sometimes maybe on the surface might not look like the perfect fit. When you were talking about Parenting Magazine, there's always room and opportunity to learn, even if it may not seem as if it's the perfect fit. But I really appreciate you taking time today. I want to thank all the candidates, the students that tuned in. And if you have any follow-up questions for Matt, I shared his LinkedIn if you want to send a question or connect with him. But thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Best of luck to all of you. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm always more than happy to have one-on-one conversations if anyone wants to explore a little deeper.
All right. Well, thanks all.